All right, recording, and I'm just going to confirm the stream. So far, everything seems to be good. So unless you hear from me, you're good to go.
All right, thank you so much, Brandy. All right, I'll call the meeting of the Active Transportation and Sustainability Advisory Committee to order. I would like to take a moment and acknowledge that many of us are gathered and meeting today on the territory of the Anishinaabe people. And the Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, who are collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. And I think it's particularly important when we're working in the area of sustainability to recognize the role that Indigenous peoples and nations have played as stewards on this land since time immemorial, and the work that they continue to do to protect this land and protect the earth. And to recognize also the harm that colonialism has caused to this planet and to people living on this land as well, and work together in the spirit of reconciliation moving forward. Looking around the room here and seeing that I don't think we have any new faces. So how does everyone feel? Do we want to do a little round of introductions, maybe a check-in? Maybe let's do a quick check-in, actually. I would love to hear from everyone how they're doing. Maybe just, how they're enjoying the summer, maybe something fun you did so far. I'll start. So I'm Keenan. I'm having a good summer so far, pretty low-key though, not really doing anything that exciting. Well, actually, that's a complete lie. I haven't done anything exciting yet, but my mom and I are going to Nova Scotia on Saturday to visit my sister, and I'm really, really looking forward to that. And I will pass it on to Wilf to do a check-in.
Scramble to find the unmute button there. Thanks, Keenan. Yeah, same here. Quiet but busy summer. Lots of as Andy was saying, lots of activity in the EV space, and things really moving quickly, and happy to see that, and solving some problems with supply, and making sure that we can actually do the things that we know we need to do and are wanting to do. So it's kind of an exciting time for sure. So yeah, and thrilled to be back here after a couple of months away and be part of this and do what we do here. And passing it on, I guess we're handing the baton on. So I don't know, randomly, Kelly, how about you?
Yeah, that's great. I love EV. Speaking of EV, I have a new transportation, my electric assist bicycle, which I've been using, replacing my vehicle as much as possible this summer. It's quite interesting. Lots of, and I had to have a little shift in my brain about it because I'm an avid exercise person. So it was like, I felt like I was wimping out getting an e-bike. But really interesting, what I've done is I've shifted my mindset to looking at my bicycle, not as exercise, because I have a regular one as well, but as transportation. So, I can put $100 worth of groceries on my bike. I can go to Costco. I, get all the things I need to do on my bicycle. The only thing that we're lacking here in the city is our protected lanes and a better system for getting on our electric bike. So that's my excitement for the summer is getting on my electric bike and using that and not emitting greenhouse gases. I'm going to pass it on to Anne-Marie.
And I've seen you, Kelly, with groceries on your bike. It's impressive. So I guess maybe on the theme of exciting summer things, I have gotten my hands on a gravel bike. So trying to follow in Kelly's footsteps, I am now, trying to choose the bike over the car. And I guess other than that, on the fun side of things, just enjoying the outdoors. So I just spent a nice long weekend fishing with family. And I will tag Laurel.
Thanks.
Yeah, nice to see everyone again. I have had a busy summer, but my most, I guess, exciting or interesting thing I've done is I went out to Jasper and did some hiking and camping for about a week. It was like really awesome. And my cousin also got married, so it was a big family trip, so it was very fun. But other than that, now kind of laying low key rest of the summer. And I will pass it on to Sarah.
Hello. So nice to hear everyone's getting out there outside and enjoying the nice weather. I too haven't had too much excitement, but have been trying to get out as much as possible. Working in my vegetable garden and biking around town. My mom also got an electric bike, so she's been joining me, and we've also been doing some grocery shopping trips. But luckily, I don't have to carry them because she has the extra gas power. Okay, so I'll pass it on to Brett.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, no, summer's been great. Just I have two little ones, so just some local little trips in and around this area and a little bit in the cottage country. Lots of exciting things happening. We're work related, so it's tough to peel me away from work for that. But on the transportation and active transportation front, and I'll pass that off to Brandy. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Brandy. I'm the committee support clerk. I'm happy to be here, part of the team. I've definitely taken advantage of this summer. I've had many little trips to go see some shows. This past weekend, I jumped in my little car, took the back roads to Quebec, spent the night there, came back, making up for lost time. So being Tuesday, I'm a little tired today from a lot of driving, but other than that, I'm still happy to be here, part of the team. And I see we have Eric back, so I'll pass it off to Eric.
I think I've got my computers working now. Yeah, we've been enjoying some hiking, discovered the Rogers Reservoir, which was very hard to find, but was a very interesting hike down near Newmarket. And the car's old enough that we risked it at the African Lion Safari, and the kids love that. And we're hoping to hike some of the various waterfalls and caves and grottos around Hamilton. And I'd hand it off to, I don't know who's left.
Andy, I think.
Andy has
We haven't
Andy.
typed yet.
Just me. Yeah. Yeah, Andy Pellin. So yeah, my summer has been weird. We are destroying what we call the murder bathroom. We bought this 1940s house with this tiny little bathroom that had a toilet that your knees touched the wall and a shower stall with just like a hose at the top. And it just looked like if you were going to commit a murder, this is where it would occur. And anyway, so we're ripping that all out right now. And so my house is just filled with dust and awfulness. And then my other exciting thing is I'm playing in my first roller derby game in 2.5, 3 years next weekend. So
You're gonna have to share those details, Andy. I come with signs. I'm a great sign maker.
yeah, well, it's at the Coldwater Steampunk Festival. So it's also steampunk themed. So if you haven't actually checked out this festival, even if you don't come see me play roller derby, which would be great, go to this festival though. It's the most creative, interesting people in the whole town gets into it. It is one of the more bizarre and awesome festivals in Ontario.
Wow, so cool. Oh my gosh, everyone's doing so many cool things on the active transportation front too, which I love to hear. All right, thanks everyone, welcome. We've got some items to get through today. The first one is a presentation, 10 Actions for Climate, Harvest Share. And I was looking through my email. I'm assuming this is Andy. You're presenting on this, right? This is a Living Green initiative. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Are you good to go? Do you have?
I am. I think I can just share my screen, and we should be good to go. If this works, And I'm assuming you guys are all seeing 10 actions for climate.
Yes.
Yes, okay, then I shall go into notes page. Come on. All right, good. All right, so I know most of you probably have heard a version of this before, but there's a few new members here that I don't know if you've had the introduction to Living Green and what we're trying to do. And so I thought this would be a really good opportunity to introduce you at what we're doing. So who we are right now is we are Barrie's only registered environmental charity, and we've been operating for over 30 years. Basically, if there's been a green initiative in this area in the past 3 decades, we likely started it or part of it in some way. We started Spring into Clean. We built the first community garden. We even started the city's first plastic recycling program before the blue box kicked in. Right now, we have 2 part-time staff and an engaged board of directors made up of 6 women and 3 men with a wide diversity of environmental knowledge and backgrounds. One of our board members, Pete Burston, was a founder back in 1991. So he's providing that continuity for us. And you can read a little bit more about their backgrounds on our website, but I am really impressed with some of the expertise that we're able to offer people. However, unlike a lot of arts and culture and sports programs, we don't receive any core funding from the municipal government, and we don't have any stable financial support outside of fundraising and our sponsors. The good news right now is that we were awarded a 1-year Resilient Communities Trillium grant to look at new opportunities to try and create that stable organizational funding. And through this grant, we're going to be looking at streamlining what we do and how we do it. And it's definitely going to be a challenging year for sure. And I definitely could use some help. And if anyone has any creative ways on how do you fund a charity, I would love to know them. We have 3 core programs. Our main one is tree planting. We're committed to planting 10,000 trees in Barrie. And right now we're focused on planting events with volunteers on public properties, so parks and EP areas. And Kevin Rankin's team has been really helpful in trying to find some of those locations that are plantable across the city. Our fruit share program connects up homeowners who have fruit trees with volunteer fruit pickers who pick that fruit to share with the food bank. But of course, due to our funding shortfall, we've not really been running this program fully for several years, but we still have it at this point. And Green Screen is what our education program is, and it includes public events like workshops, documentaries, guided themed hikes, and thanks to COVID, a lot of online webinars lately. And we also offer people access to free, unbiased, scientifically backed information with the expertise of our board of directors. But of all the things we do, we know the most important is climate change. Pandemics, politics, and wars has sadly put climate change action in the background right when we need it to be at the forefront. We need it to be not just the responsibility of government, but brought into the household level by helping people to understand what they can personally do. Climate change is a huge problem, so huge it can be overwhelming, and this can lead to inaction and disengagement. So Living Green took this big out of reach problem and boiled it down into 10 action areas. Each action has been assigned to a specific month of the year to form our annual work plan. We then focus all of our events and messaging to that action within that month and then repeat it year after year after year. So we know that things like Earth Day, for example, is in April, and we all have a general sense of what we should do on that day. And that's because the messaging on it has been consistent and repeated year after year after year. That kind of behavioral branding is what we hope to create with each of these actions. We want to make the complex simple, so people aren't so overwhelmed that they don't do anything. Which is why our first action is simply to be hopeful. This message is particularly important when speaking to the younger generations. It's hard to stay positive when the state of the world has never seemed so bleak. Wildfires, floods, droughts, and evidence that even this global pandemic is linked to climate change. And the hottest years on record have been in the last 7 years. But there's reason for hope. 8 of the 10 largest economies have pledged net zero by 2050. The cost of solar and wind power has plummeted by 90% in the past decade. Municipalities can legislate actions that can affect about 45% of our national emissions. Most climate scientists agree that we've not yet reached the point of no return. It's soon, but not yet. So how do we fight against apathy or despair? Through hope and engaged action. A person with hope has the power to change the world. A person who hopes for something must believe that something is possible, but not inevitable. It is a pragmatic and reasonable action to ask for hope for climate change. Our second action asks people to think about where their money is invested. Fortunately, with costs dropping every day, renewable energy is often the best choice for the environment and for the economy. In March, we held a free webinar on green investing, which is posted to our website if you'd like to view it. In April, in conjunction with Earth Day, we asked people to go low waste and start to really think about where stuff goes when you're done with it. If you throw something away on a finite planet, there is no such place called away. It always goes somewhere. We want people to be offended by the amount of non-recyclable plastic we let into our houses and to think about the other R's like refuse and repurpose. Recycling is often held up as something that people do for the environment that gets them off the hook for other actions. But I recycle. But recycling is actually pretty energy intensive, and a lot of stuff that you think can be recycled actually is not. Reducing food waste is a significant climate action, especially organic matter that makes its way into our landfill. When it's there, it breaks down as methane, which is 72 times more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It's easy not to waste food if you plan your weekly menu better, something I'm guilty of. I'd also like to start promoting more backyard composting and coming up with a better way to deal with pet waste. In May, we planted trees because this is the month that trees want to be planted in. We did 8 different planting events in this month, and we did ward plantings with half of the councillors, and we'll be doing the other 5 wards this fall. These neighborhood tree stewards plantings happen midweek with smaller groups. The ward plantings are important because finding larger sites on public lands for the big community planting events is getting harder all the time, which leads me to a very important point about tree planting in general. People seem to know that planting trees is a crucial climate change action, but have not quite connected that it's more complicated than just plant more trees. We don't suffer from a lack of tree seedling availability or even the money to pay for those trees. We suffer from a lack of available land to plant those trees and to maintain them properly so they reach their full potential as a climate change mitigator. In June, we want people to engage in civil discussion and make sure that all levels of government are hearing their voices. Living Green isn't a political organization, but we lend our support to all the groups who are screaming, we need action on climate change and we need it now. We want an urgent yet civil discussion about what we're all going to do in our roles as leaders, as activists, and as citizens. Then in the heat of July, we turn our thoughts to how we move around in our environment and we ask people to tread lightly. At 55%, private vehicle use is the largest emitter of Barrie's greenhouse gas emissions. We need to get people walking, biking, taking transit, carpooling, and for those who will just never give up their car, making the switch to electric vehicles when they can. Last weekend, we had our second Tread Lightly event in partnership with the Electric Vehicle Society, Firebird Cycle, and Open Air Dunlop. It went very well, except for the heat. And we had a lot of great conversations about cars, bikes, busing, cycling, etc. In addition to promoting Bike the Night, we were offering people a chance to win a new mountain bike by completing a short poll about active travel. We asked people whether they've ever used Barrie Transit, why or why not, whether they used a bike for transportation, why or why not, and whether they would consider making the switch to EV for their next vehicle. I have some of the early results of these polls, nothing super surprising, but I'll share that with everyone after. But what I'd like to do is actually continue this poll at Bike the Night. So we can continue to gather some more of this public information and maybe we get a little bit of nuggets of information as to why people are making the choices that they're making. Then in the heat of August, we asked people to think about being energy efficient and to power down. If you have the means, there are hundreds of ways to upgrade the efficiency of your home. Better insulation, heat pumps, converting to solar, purchasing better appliances, fixtures, and windows. Well, who here wouldn't want a net zero home if we could afford it? But there's also cheaper and behavioral actions like unplugging, sealing drafts, programming your thermostat to how you actually live, and adjusting power settings on monitors, just to name a few. One of our board members is right now working on a sustainable home tour video series that will explore some of these ideas further. Then in September, when local food is at its peak, we turn our attention to what we eat. We want people to eat more local and include more plant-based meals. To be blunt and crude, cow farts are made of methane. And as I already pointed out, methane is 72 times more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So even a small reduction in the amount of meat and dairy we consume can make a big difference. During this month, we celebrate plant-based recipes and eating local, fresh, and in season. Last year, we had our first Harvest Share event at Sheer Park, and it was really beautiful. We'd like to do it again this September at Leacock Park, and we'd like your help to help make it larger and even more impactful. This event will happen on Saturday, September 24th, and we'll be asking people, gardeners, especially new gardeners, and fruit tree owners to bring out their excess fruit and veggies to be shared with the community. We had people coming from all over Barrie to share with the bounty, and people came just to actually collect some of the food. I was really impressed with the amount of people that just heard about it and came down to get some free, fresh food. With all the donated produce, we had volunteers sort it by quality because, as you know, a lot of your backyard fruit and produce doesn't exactly resemble what you get in a grocery store. The table-ready produce was divided up on a free table for people to take, and the rest of it went to the Barrie Native Friendship Center for their community to be shared. The blemished fruit was pressed into cider in an antique cider press Marty Lancaster brought out, which was very cool to watch operate. And the rest went to an animal rescue, farm animal rescue for pig feed. And they were very excited to get all of that, all the cider waste in particular. So nothing was wasted at the event. And this year we want to focus a little bit more on the education about some of the harvesting soft skills that have been lost in our urban lives. We're looking for experts who run demonstrations of canning techniques, dehydration, some cooking demonstrations, composting. So if you know anyone that has some of these sort of traditional skills around food and harvesting, we'd really love to have them be part of it and do some of these demonstrations. That's why I'm reaching out to this group for that. We've started a small planning committee already. We've already met a couple times, comprised of Living Green, Urban Pantry, city staff. I think Stephanie was there. And the Barrie Native Friendship Center. And our next meeting is on Wednesday, August 10 at 10:30. So please let me know if you're interested in helping us to plan this event and all the things it could be. So back to our 10 actions. So as soon as we get done the Harvest Share event, and of course, Bike the Night is the weekend before that. Then we get back into planting again because it's October. And it's such an important climate action. We put it on our top 10 list twice. We will be doing 5 more neighborhood tree steward plantings in wards 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8, and 2 weekend community planting events, including one that's going to be Halloween themed. It'll be close to Halloween. Recognizing that about 3/4 of the land in Barrie is privately owned, we want to build a private land tree planting program that helps people to plant the right tree the right way in the right locations at their homes and businesses. But building a program like this requires resources we don't yet have, so that's all going to be part of my challenging building year. Our final action just simply asks people to buy less stuff, in particular buying less plastics and low quality disposable stuff, which doesn't have to hurt our local economy either. Living Green is committed to offering ideas for people wishing to green their holidays and provide gift ideas that don't wreck the planet. We want to feature local businesses that are offering experiences, services, and green products that promote a circular economy, a switch to local and a switch to quality over quantity. The list of actions and the monthly plan associated with it is where we want to take this organization over the coming years. We really need the help of the private and public sectors to do it. Our challenge is to build our capacity and financial resilience as an organization while serving Barrie and our growing network of volunteers who are looking for more opportunities to help. And that is my presentation. I will take questions if there is time to do it.
Thanks, Andy. Awesome. Any questions or comments from committee members? See Eric Jacoby Hawkins, your hand went up. Go ahead.
Yeah, first I want to say it's a fantastic presentation. It's really well put together, and the visuals are very strong. I know certainly the tree issue, there's a lot of enthusiasm for tree planting, and there is a huge gap in knowledge about tree care. And I think that's a big challenge. I know we got from the city a pamphlet about caring for our new tree when they replaced our boulevard tree because of the previous one being an ash that had to be removed. But I know people buy trees. I don't think they get very good care instructions. We can see below us on another street farther down that one of the neighbors put in a whole row of trees along their property line this spring, and we're seeing them all die now because they're not watering them, and they're not aware that they need all this watering, especially in a drought year. And so I think that whole line of trees may be a complete write-off. And I have a feeling that's happening all over the place. And I think that's a huge challenge to get a wider societal knowledge of the fact that trees don't just grow themselves. That they do need a lot of care in the early years for root development, or you've just wasted your time and your effort and your money.
Very, very good points. I don't know if Andy, you wanted to speak on that at all, or
Thank you for that, Eric. So I'm going to guess that those were cedars probably, but they put in, and a lot of times what people are buying, especially if they're buying them from like Walmart or Canadian Tire, they're getting trees that really aren't meant for the seed zone. So it's like right from the get-go, you've started right from the beginning with the wrong tree. And then if you're putting it in a location you haven't done any soil prep or anything like that, it's really the wrong location for the wrong tree. And then, yeah, the aftercare is something that we've never really fully understood in a way that is like, I would love to get it into schools. I want people to understand how a tree works. It's amazing how many people seem to think that the tree is what you see from the ground up, but the tree, if you want it to live, is all happening underground. That's everything is about the roots. So.
all right, I've got Kelly next, and then Anne Marie.
Thanks, Andy. That was great. I love the presentation, and I love seeing it again and again. It's getting better every time I see it. Or I'm learning more every time I see it, I think. I think what really strikes me when I see this, and I look at my brain.
Sorry,
this
Kelly.
is an opportunity.
Kelly, your mic is cutting out every once in a while.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, now it's gone.
And now you're on mute, so I don't know.
There we go. All right, how's that? Is this better?
This is
Okay,
better.
super.
Yeah.
So I just really appreciate the knowledge every time I see this presentation. I've seen it a few times, but I learn more every time I do, and it gets better and better. I really appreciate that. What I see as an opportunity is a partnership with the city. I see Living Green as somehow being a arm or some kind of connection with the city as we try to take action on climate action. And I know, it funding and all of those pieces. So I think an opportunity needs to be looked at in relationship to the city. I think that's a really important piece. And I just see that as, being quite obvious as we grow as a city, and we really need you, as that organization to help us with our climate action, because we're kind of missing the boat here. So I really think this is an important opportunity. I'm not sure how, but I think it needs to be explored.
I will say that as part of our explorations into how do we build financial resilience because again, if I don't have to be talking about funding and fundraising, all these things, we could be working on the actual actions. And that's sort of the problem with all the whole not-for-profit sector is that how much do you spend trying to figure out how to fund the things as opposed to just doing the things. But we did get to go down to Peterborough and spent the day down there looking at what Peterborough is doing. And they have an organization called Peterborough Green Up, and we got to meet with their executive director and chat with some of the things they do. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. They're miles ahead of Barrie. They just took a very different path with it. And I know they have the university there that probably changes the dynamic. But one of the things is that the city of Peterborough gives organizational support to Peterborough Green Up. And they have done it because they see that this is a financially responsible way of doing it, because it's a cheaper way to deliver services, to actually just support the not-for-profit, who can also engage in activities that are a little bit be harder for the city to do with their financial and administrative layers of bureaucracy in there. So they fund them, they deliver all these services with things like, especially stormwater is one of the big ones. So again, they administer a rain garden program, a lot of things that are going to help the bottom line for the municipality. So the challenge is going to be to make sure that when I am able to go in front of council for any kind of financial ask, I want to make sure that I have it costed so you can see that this actually is just a financially responsible decision for the city to make, and not just a feel good, we should do this kind of thing.
That's some really interesting points on that. And that's good to hear about Peterborough Green Up. I think there's probably some opportunities through first through the Stormwater Climate Action Fund that the city's developing to potentially partner with the city in some way with a program like a rain garden program or something like that. So I'm not sure if you're engaged in conversations with city staff on that in particular. And then also with the greenhouse gas, community energy and greenhouse gas reduction plan through the action tables. There might be an opportunity there for those types of partnerships too. I don't know if Andy, you're engaged.
I am, yeah. So
Okay.
I've been having some good conversations. We did get Living Green actually a seat as a stakeholder on both of those. So we're engaged in the conversation. Again, it's the proof in the pudding, or whatever the metaphor is. We just get to figure out how to do it. It's one of those, I think everyone can agree that this is a good model. Building the residential tree planting program. Like a tree on somebody else's property benefits you. And it's not the same as somebody putting in a pool in their property doesn't benefit you. Right? Whereas a tree benefits all, it's part of our green infrastructure. And as far as I can, the information is out there that, this is building a green infrastructure on private property benefits the public. And if we're going to make any gains, and this is what I was sort of alluding to in my presentation, we don't have a lot of public lands available for planting. If we're going to actually increase our tree canopy, we need to start looking at private property and being okay with the idea that taxpayer dollars may go towards some of these private property initiatives that are going to get a green infrastructure that's going to do all the things we need it to do. And as far as the Stormwater Climate Action Fund, absolutely. I'm looking forward to the next meeting on that so we can see where that's at. I think we're due for something soon out of that group. But I mean, a residential tree planting program is a stormwater project. There's a direct link to that, and that is completely one of the cheapest ways that you can actually deliver some really good stormwater efficiencies.
Mm-hmm. And I think the exciting thing about that is that there's an actual funding mechanism built in too through the stormwater fee. Okay, I think Kelly, was that it for your questions? You're good? Okay, and Anne-Marie, you're up next.
Thanks, Keenan. I had a couple of comments, things that you said just resonated with maybe our work plan and what's coming up in the fall. So we've got that private tree bylaw with the public engagement session. And I know they were trying to get everything to come back before the summer break, but I think it might be coming back this fall when staff bring back the summary of the public consultation, perhaps it becomes a really great opportunity for us to then have a conversation through this committee about what supports or synergies we see in alignment to private land tree planting program and building a case for that. The other piece that we talked about historically on this committee, I think it was asking for a budget. So it might fit later down on the agenda, but again, around some of these things, because Living Green has a formal seat on this committee, and we are looking at those interdependencies between city programming and other community programming, like Living Greens, is, is there a budget to request for this committee to be able to be more of an active participant and leverage actions around supporting some things to move forward. So my understanding is some committees do receive or request a budget for their work plan, and I think it might be important for us to identify for the next term of this committee how much money and if there are things there that we specifically want to be leveraging that tied to our strategic plan and tied to the stormwater piece. I mean, that was one of 4 different asset management plans that we as council supported. So if there is something there, I mean, there's really nice alignment. The other comment I had was maybe just coming back to tracking. I know to Andy, you presented the overall kind of 101 on Living Green to council, and there was a support for you to connect, but I'm wondering if that happened maybe with certain departments, and if it didn't happen with, I'm thinking around engineering and stormwater and that whole other side of the house, if there hasn't been a linkage to our asset management, some of the work Kelly Oakley has been doing, that maybe that's a different meeting that might be of interest to kind of look at, if there's ever an ask of this committee to touch into a recommendation for the reserve or that funding source, an understanding of why it relates to the work that we're doing at this committee and how it translates to some of the initiatives through Living Green. Just didn't want it to sit on one side that maybe didn't cross over to some of the asset management work.
No, it's definitely on my radar to make sure that that's who I connect with for some of this. I know that you've connected me with a couple other city staffers, because I think that's one of the things, as we've been intricately connected with both Kevin Bradley and Kevin Rankin's groups, but I feel like where the real gains are going to be is when we start getting into engineering and stormwater work, because A, they're going to have some funding, and B, and this is more of an opinion kind of thing, but it seems that when you go into lean times, parks and forestry get cut and some of the engineerings don't. So that might be a smarter group to align with. And again, it is green infrastructure. Like we are talking about, this is going to be a climate change mitigation tactic and a way to do it. And I think a way that can be done more fiscally responsibly.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we get caught up in the conversation or assumption that it's about trees. And so I think it creates a natural bias towards a different thought process versus, Wilf and others have spoken at this committee about, and you've started to do the tread lightly aspects, but just the cost savings. And it ties nicely into Adam's work. And even when he presented to council on the greenhouse gas reduction strategy, we had some Q&A with him that talked a lot about myth busting, like how do we get residents to opt into some of the things you're suggesting around even like how we manage electricity, but also, and I even heard at Tread Lightly event when we were talking with individuals with the EV vehicles, which is how much does it cost to actually charge? What exactly do I need for my garage? And Wilf has spoken, I think, at length around, how we can, there's really some great education that needs to happen to follow along with helping people to buy into that behavior change. And so I see that as being a whole nother part of the conversation to maybe amplify and tie the financial savings into how do we support people from a human behavior to kind of take that next step and to kind of think about what's possible or hopeful around how they can actually play a different role around energy conservation.
I did reach out to Adam ahead of designing the survey question for the Tread Lightly event. So again, that information, once we compile it, and again, I think once we get a lot more done at the Bike the Night event, then I can feed that back to them. And I think it'll actually be really, I don't know if the city put out that kind of informal survey, but it may help a little bit inform, because as we all know, if you've ever gone to a city public information center, they're not usually the most well attended of events. So this is kind of a better way, like taking it to the streets and getting some of that boots to the ground information. And of course, so Adam helped us sort of design what information they might want. And Caitlin, I also got to meet with her. And then we'll again be able to feed that back to them.
That's great. And I'm not sure if it ties over, but I would just say, I mean, this, even having your presentation recorded, and I know, again, the same one was, a similar one was recorded to council, but could be really great for other committees to have as an orientation in addition to the next council. So it might just be a promotion of, this meeting link being something that new members watch. The new members should be changed over quite a bit, this committee, but I would even say Communities in Blooms having similar conversations, right, around how do we put a spotlight on active transportation and transit. The whole criteria for Communities in Bloom might even be something to be aware of, because it changed from 2019. There's a whole different matrix we worked through with judges last week. So I'm going to, I don't want to get this wrong, I think it was Jason presented to us around what was happening in transit. Am I right, Brett, that it was Jason? I hope I didn't get it wrong. My memory kind of in a couple of different thought processes, but we had a presentation here about what we couldn't do, I think, through transit around bus stop rooftop gardens and water conservation tied to seed and plantings and also active transportation. We got a really great response to this committee, but the same conversation happened at Communities in Bloom. And staff were able to come across and present about what was or wasn't possible. That actually translated to them being identified and spoke with the judges. And the whole conversation is much more broader, of course, than just beautification through flowers, but native species, but also into how are we connecting people to place differently and inviting them into the outdoors and community collisions. And so I think this ties quite nicely, and we might want to think a bit about the mandates as we come into Communities in Bloom and active transportation sustainability, because there are things that were highlighted through that team with the judges, and they highly complement the things that we've been discussing or have been doing through tree planting and other things. Anyways, those are my comments, but I think we just need to also broaden out the conversation, the tables that we've been talking to.
I'd like that.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. And on the, you had mentioned the piece about the budget for this committee too. That's something that I've included in the legacy items that I'll be presenting on for the transition document, I guess it's called, in the agenda. So that's definitely something that I think we can push for with the new term. Anything else, Anne-Marie, or are you good?
No, and it was Jason Zimmerman. I blanked there for a minute, but just kudos to the team, because I think staff too that are tied to some of the work and conversations have been able to carry it forward into different tables.
Great. Any other questions or comments on Andy's presentation? Not seeing any hands. Andy, would you like to add anything else before we
Just a final pitch, if you guys want to be involved in Harvest Share. We do need to sort of plan this thing and get it up and running soon. So please just reach out to me separately if you have interest in it. That's it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Welcome. I've got some contacts I'll send your way too, Andy.
That's great. All right, thanks. So that brings us to our first discussion item, which is an update on Bike the Night. And I'll let the group that's been working on it take that away. I don't know who wants to take the lead on that. I see Anne-Marie unmuting.
Everyone's coming. Kelly and Laurel. Yeah.
Sure,
So,
I can start. We are getting there. I'll let Andy speak to a couple of things too about the printing and materials and that sort of thing. I think we ran into a couple of glitches with budgets, items around counselors' money versus being able to use it for certain things. So I can't speak to that directly, but I think Andy can. The permit process has been an interesting process. I kind of completed it about a month and a half ago and hadn't heard anything, and I kept getting approvals in, and then all of a sudden I got a bunch of roadblocks. So we're working through that, trying to and it's great. Stacy at the BIA is going to help with a couple of items as well. So I think we will we'll manage through that for sure. It'll work out really well once we get that. I'll be reaching out for some help on development of the emergency plan, as well as the COVID plan, and I may reach out to Sarah and for that assistance. So as soon as that gets submitted, but everything else is basically on an approval level, good to go. The only item that we're kind of missing is funding for the first aid team that has to be on site. So it's about a $900 investment that we need to cover. And I don't think we can do it through the council's money, whether that was Sergio's or Keenan's. So we need to kind of sort that out. But everything is coming along. I think, Andy, I'm not sure what the update is on people that are registered, but maybe I'll let you speak to that. I know Sarah had updated that as well. So yeah, everything is coming along and moving forward. We've got our meeting this week, so we'll tie up some loose ends as well so we can have an update. But we've got another meeting on Thursday this week. That's my update. So whoever else wants to add.
I will say that, yeah, so the budget from Sergio is not going to come through, because I think when he had committed to it, it was for I was basically told by the mayor's office that it wouldn't been covered because it's not a project, it's not a community improvement project, it's an event, and that events aren't covered from this fund. So we don't have that sort of free and clear money that we thought we had. Keenan, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as your commitment to it as well, it could be for in-house printing and things like this. So again, we have I think we've got to figure out the financial piece, because like Living Green's not seeing any of the money being recovered that we've put into it. And now we have this $900 paramedic bill that we can't cover. So I hate talking about it, but it seems to be the thing that right now is just it's not working. Maybe this is now we need to reach out and try and find some unfettered sponsorship dollars that might help with some of these things. But yeah, I hate being that wet blanket, but that seems to be where we're at right now.
So I think with so the way we passed the motion was about in-house printing, but there might be a way for us to get around it using, because I'm not using the same budget that Sergio was using. He was using the ward specific projects budget. I'm using my actual counselor's office communications budget, which is more flexible. But just because of the way we did the motion, that's why it was speaking to in-house printing. But I think we might be able to get around that with an invoice. But maybe I can pull Andy. Andy, would it be best for you to meet with me and maybe the clerk's office to kind of figure out the logistics of that?
Yeah.
And what's allowed? Because even the is it St. John ambulance fee, that might even be able to be covered by my counselor budget, because I know that's a lot more flexible than the ward specific project budget. So I'll loop you into an email with the clerk, because she's the one that knows all the rules and guidelines around the council funding. When are you guys having your bike the night meeting this week?
Thursday,
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
Okay. I'll try to get some more information from the clerk's office before then, if not an actual meeting with her before then. But yeah, I'm sorry that it's been not a smooth process for the funding. That's frustrating.
That's good. If we could clarify that, that would be amazing, Keenan, before Thursday, just so we can pivot and then talk a bit about strategies. Because those are pretty well the biggest pieces is really just the comm material and expenses out of pocket based on funds that were thought to be there. And if then the St. John. So that would be a big help, and I think would probably resolve most of what we've got left to address outside of what we can handle through just our emergency plan.
And I will say, I think last time I talked to you, and I'm sure there's been a few more come in, that we had over close to 150 people registered already. And again, we did it through Facebook, but we linked it to an Eventbrite. So people actually had to sign up as if they're getting a paid ticket, even though it's for free. So I feel like there's like that 150, there's a really good chance that they would all come, as opposed to Facebook people saying they're coming and they don't come. But once you do this Eventbrite, they get a ticket and a reminder a couple days before and then the day of, so I think it is, we are looking at a pretty significant amount of people coming. Those are even just the people that said they're coming. We don't know how many people. Yeah. So that also makes me a little nervous because it's a large amount of people.
It's good. I guess maybe the only final call out that will probably hit our agenda on Thursday correctively are if any members of this committee that are not on the planning committee for Bike the Night are around or interested in attending, we will be looking for some volunteers just to support Barrie Police and others that we've got at different kind of stations along the route, be it on bike, but some that we would just want on foot that helps to guide people back onto making sure that they are taking the right route as they kind of do a bit of an out and back loop. So if you know anyone around and interested, we'll look at kind of getting dressed up and being nice and visible and helping to maybe have some guide flags to usher in some of our individuals of all ages that'll be on their bikes.
Awesome. Okay. So any members of this committee that are interested, should they reach out to you, Anne-Marie?
To make it easy, just hit me by email and let me know.
Okay, great. All right, anything else on Bike the Night? All right. I can't believe next month is September. Thanks. Exciting though. Okay. Not seeing anything else on that. So the next item we had on the agenda was on the move. And I see that Sherry's not here, and I know she was the one that wanted to have this on the agenda, but Sarah, I'm not sure if you're going to be presenting on it or talking about on the move.
So I can provide an update provided by Sherry.
Oh, awesome.
Or Brady, did you want to do that? I know there was some email back and forth.
Well, she did send an email for a few things that could be read out to the committee that I'm more than happy to read in for her. With respect to questions, I myself won't be able to answer any. I'm not sure, Sarah, how in depth you'd be able to answer the questions, but I could at least read the email that was sent by Sherry. So she says, go ahead.
I can do the same. I might be able to answer sort of those mitigation, adaptation around climate change and sustainability questions. Otherwise, I can just record questions and have Sherry get back to you on that. And that's just because we work for different teams. So while our teams collaborate on several initiatives, this is sort of led by Sherry's team. So either approach, if you want to do it, Brady, that's great. If you prefer me to share Sherry's update, that works too.
Yeah, no, if you want to go ahead and read it, and then that way as the questions kind of come in, you can kind of record them or answer what you know, and then I'll be here to back up just in case there's any issues.
Okay, sounds good. So please, I apologize and please stand with me, but as you've probably taken note, I am sort of reading Sherry's updates. So the next meeting for the Simcoe Muskoka Active Travel Steering Committee is scheduled for Tuesday, August 9th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. And this meeting continues to be virtual. And the next meeting is open to any new stakeholders to attend to learn about the group and potential activities being discussed at a regional level or potential to become involved in some way. And if new participants join this meeting, there are no obligations. It's just sort of a come and learn session and seeing future opportunities. So at present, there are representatives from school boards, municipalities, public health, and community groups, such as the Environmental Network. So if you have questions or like to receive this meeting invitation, you can email Sherry Diaz, and I can share that with the group afterwards, or myself, and I can connect you with Sherry. So that's update number 1. Number 2, so the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board has recently become more involved in the promotion of active school travel, and they are now attending the regional steering committee meetings. Formerly, it was mainly representatives from Simcoe County District School Board who have been involved in the steering committee, with certain schools from the board receiving facilitated support. So update 3, there is a small group of public health and school board staff currently working on back to school social media messages. So Sherry can share these with the committee, or this committee, when they are ready later in August, if the committee members are interested in promoting active school travel messages for return to school this fall. And so again, if you're interested in that, please reach out to Sherry Diaz through email. I think everyone will have that. And if not, again, we can share that. And then lastly, we will be reconnecting with the Barrie schools this fall. And those who have had previously been working with using the active school travel planning model to develop their interest and capacity to contribute to their on the move activities. This includes Kendall Heights, Trillium Woods, Willow Landing, Oakley Park. So things have essentially been on hold due to the pandemic, and this sort of fall will be reassessing what can be achieved. So following this, we public health staff will assess our capacity to work with additional schools. And if someone is aware of Barrie schools with an interest or readiness to move ahead on active school travel and promotion and receive support, feel free again to email Sherry. So those are the updates that I have to share. If there's any questions, I will try to answer them, but most likely I will record them and share them with Sherry.
Thanks, Sarah. Awesome. I see Kelly's hand. Go ahead.
Thank you. One of the things that I wanted to make sure we did this fall, we did have signs that were made available for Cundles Heights Public School on minutes, 5 minutes to ride your bike from this point, 10 minutes. And I believe the city does have them in hand. I would love to see those installed for this coming school year. So I'm not sure who we can talk to make that happen.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Sherry would probably know. I know Sherry had presented about the materials that they have on hand, the resources, the communication resources that they have on hand. And I think it was Justin from Transit who might have mentioned that they have some of the materials as well. Anne-Marie, did you have something to add on that point specifically?
Yeah, we did have an update a little while ago about the status of the signs. So I'm wondering if it's easier, Sarah, just so I don't get it wrong, if that can come back, because there was a delay in those 4 schools as part of the project for the signage going up, I think with COVID. And I'm not sure if there's an implementation plan now. And then there was a broader conversation, I think, around how to get signs up in all of our schools across the city of Barrie, regardless of being in the pilot, and what would it cost to do that if the purchasing of the signs perhaps could be a consideration of the city. And the install was more sitting with a school and city communication. But if that could come back, I think that what might be helpful around those 4, not just Cundles Heights, but there were 3 others in various part of the project that I think have yet to go up.
I have made note of that and will bring this forward to Sherry.
Okay, thanks. Justin, I saw you coming on. Did you have anything about that? I'm trying to remember, there was a delay in that, but the relationship between the signs.
Sorry about that. Yes. So we staff are actually gonna go out this week. I've made arrangements with our operations crew to kind of do a walkabout. So there are 2 signs. There's a 5-minute walking route and a 10-minute walking route that we will be installing at the 4 locations throughout Barrie. So they're Cundall's Heights, Trillium Woods, which is a school at Veterans and Harvey, Oakley Park, which I believe is Davison
Grove.
area.
Yeah.
And Willow Landing, which is Big Bay Point. So we will be kind of looking to target, kind of call them collector, kind of feeder areas as kids kind of come in. The exact locations are to be determined, but we will be looking to get those erected and ready for the September start. We may have to put a couple on temporary stands because locates are a little bit timely to try to get back, but we will have them installed for the September start. So that is our game plan, and that will hopefully all be sorted out this week. So just for reference, the 5-minute walking distance is about a 300-meter radius of the school property. And then the 10-minute walking distance is a 600-meter radius. And that's based on a standard walking speed of 1 meter per second. So
Thanks for that update, Justin. We appreciate that.
no problem.
Anne-Marie, did you have anything to add? And then I see Kelly's hand as well.
Yeah, I didn't know if Kelly's was back or a new one. Go ahead, Cal, if you had a follow-up.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate that. I guess a couple of clarity questions. So is it walking and cycling? That's my first question. And sorry, go ahead.
Yes, they are, I forget the exact wording. I think it's a 5-minute walk and a 3-minute cycle, and like a 10-minute walk and a 7-minute cycle. I forget the exact wording of the signs, but I'm more familiar with walking speed, seeing with like programming of traffic signals, than I am with like average cycling speeds. So for my ease of my placements, I'm based on the walking speed, but the signs are referenced for both, and there is a bit of a time variable difference on the sign. I believe it's about a 2-minute, 3-minute difference between the two.
That's great. And my second question is, did you say there were 2 signs per school?
Truthfully, I don't remember the exact quantities off the top of my head. I believe there was 4 signs per school, 2 5 minutes and 2 10 minutes.
Right. Okay. And then the third question is this being coordinated with the school principal to coordinate the installation and education, I guess? So the communication piece around how this is being promoted with the school?
So we did kind of do the walkabouts with the schools, and I'll call it early 2020. Some of it generally wasn't the principals. It was some form of subcommittees. A lot of it was like a vice principal and or teacher that was part of whatever program it kind of jived with. Like for instance, Willow Landing was with the vice principal, and it was part of the climate change group. So it really depends on that. So at the current time, no, we haven't reached out to the schools because schools are closed. We'll kind of set them up, but if we find that they're ineffective where they are, it's just a couple bolts. It's not overly complicated to move if we need to. But we did do walking routes with the schools, and we set up kind of typical catchments. So we've kind of got a pretty good understanding. Like for instance, Willow Landing, there's a main catwalk at the back that feeds into the school. I'd probably try to do something as you get into that crescent that leads in, which I believe is Leggett. Kind of feeds into the school from the north end. And then on the south end, they kind of cut through the park. So I may look to kind of do something that kind of a catchment of where that goes in through the park. But no, we have not kind of coordinated with the schools. Most likely, given that city staff have a little bit more of technical experts, we'll kind of determine where we think the best location is, kind of map them out, and then pass them off to the health unit to coordinate, because Sherry's the key contact to the schools, and go from there, as opposed to the reverse. It's just my experience is probably the best. And then if there is need, we can change them. As I said, it's not overly complicated to unbolt and rebolt. So
That's great. Yeah, as long as it's coordinated with the schools. So, the signs are going up and they know that they need to educate their kids about these signs. I really appreciate that, Justin. Thank you.
not a problem.
Thanks, Kelly. Anne-Marie, see your hand again. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I'll send the link just as maybe a backdrop to Brandy to send out, because I don't think we've got a chat box here, but as Justin's relaying, so the health unit has the full strategy online for background around the brand and the relationship to Green Keenies Canada, which might be great to see how it's structured around school engagement. And then the other piece, maybe just as a point of interest, I've just joined the Active School Travel Steering Committee. So I'll be at that meeting on Tuesday as well. Can help bring information back as it relates to it.
Okay.
But Justin, I didn't know, once the signs are up, if you could flag this committee if it's before we meet again, because I think it would also maybe be interesting for the Bike the Night group to see about opportunities to promote the signage in alignment with kind of getting kids ready and participating in kind of practicing safe on-road skills. Every year we see kind of the reminders for school buses on the road and kids taking active transportation modes to school. And doing some of that before September Bike the Night event. I think we're looking at trying to look at how we can engage and encourage individuals to start getting comfortable with their bikes before the event too.
Certainly, yeah. The key maps that we prepare to send off to kind of the schools, we can definitely just forward them along to the committee as well.
Okay.
Not a problem. Yeah. And as far as the central committee for the active school, staff, myself in particular, do sit on that committee as well. So we are up to speed on all of that. So
awesome. That's fantastic. Thanks, Justin. Because I'm thinking maybe it'd be nice for the Bike the Night group to engage those schools soon after Justin relays that the signs are up, and then we can kind of see what they need to support maybe having a team or a group ride as part of the event. No more questions from me, though, more just comments about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne-Marie. And thank you, Justin, for providing all those updates. Thanks again, Sarah, for on the presentation. Any other questions on the move? Not seeing any. Okay. So with that, we can move on to the next agenda item, which is the transition document for the new term. So I'll start sharing my screen. I've got a little presentation here. Okay. Can everyone see that? Seeing nods. Okay. Awesome. How do I start a slideshow on Google Slides? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So the approach I took with this was to try to make this digestible and accessible for the new committee. So I've kind of taken 7 of the key initiatives that I think the work of the Active Transportation Sustainability Committee kind of falls under. I took some feedback from previous discussions we've had and incorporated that. And I'm hoping to package this as basically a memo or an information packet for the new committee members with all the documentation attached as appendices, with some of the tracking of the items that we passed throughout this term as well for their information. So these are the 7 items that I feel I captured the sort of core of our work. And I'll go through them one at a time too. And I'm looking here for feedback from the committee on this approach to sort of the transition, whether we think this is a good approach, whether we think there's anything missing on any of these individual items or on the whole. So I started off with the community energy and greenhouse gas reduction plan because it's sort of an all-encompassing plan for the community on sustainability issues, and active transportation is a key part of this this plan as well. So I wanted to highlight the importance of this by having it first on the list. And so I've just included, wanted to keep it simple, just included a link to the actual plan, who the staff contacts are. And I was thinking, as part of the final package that gets presented to the new committee, we suggest a series of presentations at the beginning of their term from the staff contacts on each of these overarching strategies, so that everyone's starting off from the same page and knowing sort of where the city's already headed. Any questions on this first piece at all? Not seeing any. Oh, Kelly, yeah. You're on.
Yeah, just quickly, what do you mean by advocating for funding?
Yeah, so there's currently no funding. So that's a good point. I think this could be expanded on in the document as well. There's currently no funding allocated to the actual actions in the community energy and greenhouse gas reduction plan. So you have the big moves in the plan around a home energy retrofit program and transitioning to electric vehicles and promoting active transportation. And we've got no funding or actual programs in place so far. So that's what I mean. There's a plan right now, and nothing's really backing it up. I think I should probably expand. That brings up an important point about this document. I think I should probably expand on opportunities for engagement with this greenhouse gas reduction plan. There are the action tables in the plan that will include stakeholders in the community and city staff. And perhaps that's an opportunity for this committee to be more involved in those action tables. And I can talk to Adam and Caitlin about that, about how best to recommend to the committee that they be involved in those action tables. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay. Any other questions on this piece? And feel free to give feedback on the whole thing at the end too, or after the committee meeting as well. And I will try to incorporate that. So the next big piece that I chose is the Cycleberry infrastructure program, which is the city's first dedicated infrastructure program for cycling. And I added here, I wanted to give a shout out to safe and separated facilities in particular, since those are, I think, should be our highest priority and will make the biggest difference in terms of getting people to use active transportation. So provided a link there to the page on the city's website, and staff contact Brett. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities once this program gets rolling for education and outreach, and I think this committee can be a great resource for staff in terms of that link to the community, but then also advocating to council to make sure that the highest quality infrastructure is funded and can be pushed up even. Like, let's try to do it as soon as possible since time is running out. Any questions on this piece, or any comments or feedback on this piece and how it's presented? Not seeing any. Yeah, Emery?
I guess for the next committee, depending on the turnover, are we asking for there to be an effort to reapply to this or an orientation to say how, who's kind of tracking oversight of our change over time on all the metrics, and when in the next 4-year term should we be reapplying again? So is there a goal setting here around actually applying to be a cycle-friendly city?
Yes, so you read my mind. I thought thought this was a great way for us to sort of track the progress, since we do have that past feedback on our unsuccessful applications. I need to add the link in there, and I think I can post it. I'll have to post it to a Google Drive or something to make it accessible, or just attach it to the final document as an appendix so that they have all that past feedback. Because I think that was shared through Sherry, who was on the working group before.
Yeah, and in addition to the
Yeah.
feedback, so Kelly and that small group with staff, I think, did a lot of work around even looking at the feedback from the last evaluation, but also what have we done since then and opportunities. So I think there was kind of a finer look. And so that would be an important document to make sure moved forward to the next committee. I think it were at least some notes and reflection around what have we actually done since, and where were we as current state? Perhaps last year, I think that was done, Kelly, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, I think so. And also Sherry was going to take another look at it as well. So I think we've looked at it a couple of times. There is a matrix for sure. I don't know if we've made any progress since the last matrix update, but yeah, that's definitely a document that needs to be included.
Yeah, so maybe at least year one is a check-in and kind of a refresh scan, and then maybe a goal set specifically for when we apply again in year 2 or year 3 of that committee.
Yeah. Okay, so do you think in terms of the recommendation to the new committee, like, do you think we should add to this paragraph here, like set a goal on when to reapply? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be a buyer before 2025, before, so it still falls within what's doable over the next term, but
yeah,
but sooner if we've made progress in some of these items, but with a goal that by 2025 we've actually applied and we're getting the feedback before the end of that term.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
That's my thought. I'm not sure about others.
Any other thoughts on that, Andy?
Well, I'm just wondering where one would maybe mention Firebird Community Cycle, and to make sure if any new members are coming in, they're aware of what this group is trying to do. And yeah, I'm again not sure where that would fit in there, but I think that they're a key one that that could be playing a big role in this this action.
Is it a broader piece too? I'm not sure about how deep we want to get with subcommittees, but I know with Bike the Night, we want that to continue. We've got some pieces that tie to kind of the resident engagement side of active transportation. So maybe it's a consideration for the next committee to also look at if a subcommittee is needed to facilitate some of these things, and Firebird be a member of that, invited member of that subcommittee.
Yeah.
In addition to what Andy's saying.
Yeah, I like that idea, that suggestion. So, and this raises some bigger questions about the transition document too, which I think are important, like perhaps an appendix or a section on just key stakeholders and how they fit into the work that this committee does. Because we've got Living Green, Natureberry has been involved in things that this committee does. So giving sort of a quick overview of those organizations and how they've been involved, and then also subcommittees themselves, the work that they've done in this term, and then maybe some suggestions on subcommittee structure and membership for the new term.
Yeah, on that thread, just so people don't have to walk through all the agendas, I'm not sure if it's easy to pull a quick one-pager together of different stakeholders that have presented or we've had come to the meeting, so there can be some continuity in the next term.
Yeah, I could probably handle that and do that. Yeah.
I don't know if we keep it, but just the dates are helpful.
Yeah.
I was just going to add, Keenan, maybe another appendix would be the goals or the timelines around things. Like you have one for your partners, and then a second one that would have dates. Like if rather than trying to put the 2025 on here, like, or maybe you do that too, but putting a bit of a schedule or priorities for timelines.
Yeah, I do like that idea. That would take some work to get together, but I could probably figure, because I'm thinking in terms of how granular we want to get. Like,
I was thinking it would just be like, you know, if there's a deadline for each of these actions, do we have that in there? Or, you know,
Yeah.
the target date for completion of something. But then, like Anne Marie already said, you could start, it could get pretty complex if you started adding things like Bike the Night every year in September or whatever. Like it could really spiral into.
Yeah, I'll do some work on that and some thinking around that, around the timeline appendix. I think that would be helpful, and we could just add, yeah, just a few key dates and maybe not get too granular in terms of the actual strategies we're mentioning here. Like I was thinking,
sure,
like,
yeah.
like the greenhouse gas reduction plan, like should we be adding timelines from that plan into our timelines
Right,
here?
right.
That might be a little too much, but maybe committee specific timelines we could get into, but that's a great suggestion. And I will work around with that, play around with that a bit. Okay, anything else on the bicycle friendly communities, or any other thoughts that are coming up right now about the transition document in general?
Without seeing ahead, I'm not sure if I'm covering this, but I was going to hold that you mentioned the climate change plan, but not the adaptation, which is a whole nother strategy. Is it in your deck, Keenan?
It is in there too.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll move to this next item. So this is more of a structure of the committee slide. So it talks about that budget that we are hoping to have as a committee. And I've put it here as for events, outreach, and promotion. I don't know if we want to expand that in terms of our suggestion to the new committee for what they advocate for, but that seems to me like the most likely thing we would use a budget for as a committee. And then I've added the suggestion from Wilf here: consider a meeting structure that allows for equal time to be dedicated to active transportation and sustainability issues, so that we're having an equal focus on each of those categories. Any other? I made some notes earlier when Anne Marie was talking around, you know, maybe we should be making a specific suggestion here to the new term around an amount for the budget. So I don't know how committee members feel about that, or.
Well, considering Bike the Night, it's kind of come at the grace of other people's budgets, maybe a $2,000 budget with a sustainability plan for Bike the Night or more. But I don't know what's reasonable. Brandy, if you would have that information through the clerks, if she could even gather what other committees have asked and what's been supported. But I would kind of say between $2,000 and $5,000 with some opportunity. I don't know, like maybe you want more, but at least something there. So we're not coming into the budget. They want motion on that. But if we need an intake form into the 2023 budget, we probably want to give it some guidance, not too much longer out.
Yeah.
Do you want to put it as a per annum? So say $2,500 per year?
Yeah, I definitely think it should be a per annum budget. That's a great suggestion to make that clear.
I know what's up.
Yeah, go ahead, Wolf.
Okay, thanks, Keenan. I don't know whether you want to use this time or get into this a bit later, because this is obviously a budget item here, just on the structure of the committee and the types of tasks that we want to tackle in future years, which might be the segue to how much money do we need and what should we be asking for in the budget.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry, you help me understand. Sorry.
Sorry, I was not very clear on that. Your topic here is budget, and I'm just asking wondering whether we want to do a bit of a deeper dive on what this committee is going to try to tackle in coming years, which is a separate discussion in a sense, but is also the segue to what type of budget might we need for some of the other activities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what this whole discussion around the transition document is meant to be about. Like, what do we think are the key active transportation and sustainability issues that the new term should focus on? And that's kind of why I took this approach of looking at, you know, these plans and strategies that the city has already adopted, and how do we actually implement them and move them forward. it seems to me like it's probably the best route for the new committee to sort of put the pedal to the metal on these plans and strategies that already exist, because they'll have a stronger case to council in that sense. But I don't know. Like, I'm open to other suggestions about how we present. What initiatives or issues we think the new committee should focus on.
The 2,500 per year might at least be protective of the Bike the Night until the new term decides on what's the sustainability plan. And then again, the new term deciding on, depending on what you want to take on year over year, adding to that budget. Or is it, part of me is thinking maybe more of it, depending on the strategy, is not the budget of the committee. It's probably ensuring that there's advocacy or some type of motion to identify the importance of when council is making the 2023 annual budgets, what's not cut, or the relationship to the climate adaptation and greenhouse gas emissions strategies when staff are putting their intake forms into the budget, that there's an appreciation of how important that is to some of our climate action work. So it might not be the committee budget, it might just be, how do we ensure that the city's departmental budget is supported for those strategies? Just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, we're kind of talking about two different things here. Yeah, the budget is just for what our activities are for this committee, or just for our committee activities. But then, we have a bigger role to play in terms of advocating on those city actions in these plans. Wolf, did you?
Yeah, I think I'd sort of echo what both of you are saying. Is the committee itself might need a budget from time to time to say perhaps hire an expert to give a presentation or a recommendation to support something that we want to bring to council. But the initiatives like Bike the Night and so on, they deserve their own budget. And I think it's this committee's role probably to ask council for budgets for those specific initiatives, and that's going to vary year to year, depending what we're working on. The question that strikes me here is, what does the committee itself need for a budget? Does it need a budget? Or is that something that we ask for as we need it?
Yeah, you raised an important question around, what else are we going to use a budget for? I don't know. The hiring the expert thing, I mean, potentially. Do people have thoughts on that piece at all, or what other things we could use a budget for, and maybe we should consider? Andy.
So where I struggle with Living Green is, again, you hear me like a broken record around like, how do we fund these things? But I mean, the events that we are putting on, we are doing it piecemeal with whatever we can cobble together. But it always strikes me in the back of my head that, when we do something like a Harvest Share event, like how much that is a benefit to the city. So a lot of the events that were already sort of created and that we're already working on are ones that really should have almost been supported by the city, and so without being too bold and saying you should just support us, but it is kind of one of those, like, we've already been doing a couple of these annual events, and we worked through the kinks and found out that, at the very least, yes, this is worth doing. Not to diminish Bike the Night, but we haven't even done one yet. And we're already talking about next year. And whereas Living Green is constantly doing these events like Tread Lightly, like the tree planting events, all these things. And then again, the public education ones that we're putting together. I'd love to see Harvest Share figure out how the city can adopt it as being the city's program. It's a little bit like what I said with the history of Living Green, being a little bit of the one that sort of starts something, and then when it's proven, you can see how it can work and how it can be a big benefit, then the city takes it on, like Spring into Clean and all of the other programs. So again, I don't know if if Living Greens events are ones that could be supported through a city ask through this committee, if that's something that this committee at this point thinks that is worthwhile, or is that too self-serving to even put that out there? I'm just saying we're sort of already doing a lot of these things without any support, and you know, can obviously do them a lot better with support.
No, absolutely. That's a really good point, and I think that's kind of possible with the framing here we have around a budget for the committee activities. Like, it would be the good thing about the committee actually having its own budget is that the committee has a say over how that budget gets spent, rather than city council having a say over how that budget gets spent. So we're kind of removing a layer of political advocacy that needs to happen by just having this committee advocate for a budget for itself, and then it can have the flexibility to work with groups on events, outreach, and promotion, like working with Living Green on Tread Lightly or whatever the future committee feels would be best. But I think that's the intention, is to provide that flexibility with that budget that we don't currently have, where we have to, like right now, the approach would be going with an individual motion up through city council for each thing we want to spend money on. And we know how things that can turn out. It can be difficult. It's an extra layer of approval. But then with this budget, we could kind of streamline it. Wilf, did you have something to add on that, please?
Yeah, I mostly just to support Andy's comment that I think we should be bringing recommendations to council more often to support Living Green and other initiatives like this. I think it'd be very difficult for us to tag what those budget asks would be in advance, and that's why I was trying to differentiate between, is this a budget for the committee to operate, or is it a budget to support initiatives the committee might bring forward? And if it's initiatives, frankly, we're going to need an awful lot more money than $2,500, particularly once we do a dive into the climate change initiatives that were recommended earlier this year. So you and I have spoken about this before, and I think I brought it up at one of the meetings that I'd love to see us have a sort of a work plan and a schedule where we more regularly work with staff to bring recommendations to council to say, to talk about things like what Andy's working on, what other initiatives we'd like to see happen in the city, and ask council to support that, and ask for, have a specific ask for a budget to back those recommendations. So, it seems to me like there's two budgets we're talking about. One is ad hoc for specific initiatives like Andy's and Living Green, and the other is for this committee to operate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not sure if there's any actual costs we have identified to the committee just operating. Besides, like right now, the committee is the one taking the lead on Bike the Night, and that's why we kind of identified Bike the Night as a need for the budget for this committee. But beyond that, I'm not sure if we know if there are any other costs that this committee would have besides for specific initiatives, like you've mentioned, Wilf. Which do we want to keep doing that on an ad hoc basis, or I don't know how you do it otherwise, to be honest, except for having this budget for the committee and then allowing the committee to flexibly decide how to spend it. I saw Eric's hand, and then Kelly is up after. Eric, you're still on mute. Not sure. You came off mute for half a second and then went back on. There you go.
There we go. My computer's on lag here. I think definitely part of the pitch to council of having a certain amount of ad hoc budget is it would reduce a lot of basically unnecessary time spent by council if we have to submit a small expense proposal to them for them to vote on piecemeal, like each one at a time. And in fact, sometimes we have to do that through a committee of council even before it goes to council. And so I think that it's in council's interest to reduce the time cost of having to debate and vote on each of those things. So I think that could be definitely part of the pitch to have this. And then the corollary would be we would have an annual report on how the funding was used And then council could then, vote to accept that report and basically show that we're not frittering away the funding. But I think it would streamline the process. And I think that's part of the value of doing this.
Mhm. Absolutely. Kelly?
Okay, so if I was to look at this from above, and I would say this is the Active Transportation Sustainability Advisory Committee. This committee is formed based on, we have a outline. I believe this committee was created in 2018. And I believe there is a outline describing what the committee is and does. I think for it to, and I don't believe it included, and I had this conversation with Sherry briefly about, I don't believe it included promotion events activities at the time, or it wasn't very specific to that. I'm wondering if the actual description or of this particular committee needs to change to include specific items, or would it still be an advisory committee? Which kind of means to me just making recommendations, not actually action plans or doing anything. So perhaps that's something that needs to be revised, is, whether it's the name of the committee and or what the actions are that the committee is required to do. I think that's important because the council is changing again, come the new council. So if this committee wants to make a recommendation to actually have the established guideline for the committee to change, then that might be a really good opportunity. The other point too, when I looked at the Excel sheet and I looked from 2018 up till now, we haven't had a lot of action on our recommendations. That's disappointing. So if I was to evaluate the committee, and it's nothing about the committee. All I'm looking at is what has been done making these recommendations, and not a lot has. So things are still in limbo. So is that what we want to kind of continue doing for the next 4 years? We don't. We want to somehow look at how we get things done. And I'm not sure if things, that's just my view of it. So I think from a structural, we can have this conversation about what we'd like, but structurally, I think it needs to come back to whether it's, the recommendation on what this really means and how more effectively we can be. Because if we're honestly just giving lip service to, we're making all these recommendations and they're kind of going into a black hole and nothing really comes back, and there's no thing that happens, what could we do better, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Those are some really important points. So just so we're all on the same page, like the mandate for the committee is to provide advice and perspectives associated with policies, programs, and facilities while promoting the following: a safe, convenient, sustainable, and accessible active transportation system, and a sustainable, efficient, healthy, and resilient environment and community. So it's pretty high level, pretty broad, providing advice and perspectives on policies, programs, and facilities, and promoting. So very broad. I mean, that's a discussion we can have around recommendations to the committee if we, want to narrow the focus, broaden the focus, or change it. I don't know, but I think you raise a really important point around, follow through on our recommendations to council. And that was kind of my thinking with, focusing on the plans and strategies that have been approved and how do we actually implement them and get the funding to implement them, because it comes down to funding. City council over the past, couple of decades has taken a low tax approach. And so, staff are competing for resources and are doing a lot of these things off the side of their desk. And so it's hard to keep up with all the recommendations from these committees when we ask for a new report, and just because they're struggling to keep up with the basic operating services for our residents because of the low property tax numbers that we set. So I don't know, if that, I don't know if you want to add anything else, Kelly, on that, or any specific suggestions on the transition document for what we can include, but
Yeah, it is a very broad description of what this committee does. It'd be great if this was an actionable educational committee that had some kind of specific mandate every year to implement education for residents. But, as Andy said, that's exactly what they do too, right? So is there a coordination that can happen? I just see, for us to work more efficiently and effectively, to have specific directives and some money tied to it. It'd be so great if we advocate for the greenhouse gas reduction plan that doesn't have any money attached to it. Yeah, we need money to make things happen, guys. We can't just, say we're going to do stuff and not attach any funds to it. So yeah, that's really important. And we should definitely advocate for that. But in the meantime, are there smaller little things that, this committee can be actionable on as it moves forward?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that comes down to us being an advisory committee too, right? Like, we're about giving advice and not necessarily about getting down to action. That's where the paid city staff come in, and city council setting the budget to be able to enable the paid city staff to be able to implement those actions. I have Anne-Marie next, and then Andy, and then Laurel.
So a couple of thoughts, knowing that we can't really influence too much into the next term, right? We're kind of giving them some guidelines. And in that thought, it is, if we can at minimum say, you're going to want $2,500 to do bike the night and or figure out a sustainability plan. And wouldn't it be great if maybe the city looked at that and said, we can take this on as an event with BIA and others, and it actually becomes an annual city event. It's not based on the will of a committee or members of a committee that change over every 4 years, or around asking for dollars. And they've got a sponsorship arm, an initiative now where the city can look at other opportunities too. My other thoughts just from the conversation are, if I think of it from an equity lens, we have arts and culture grants. We now have a $300,000 sport and rec grant that was fully utilized. Wouldn't it be great if this committee maybe made a recommendation that we also look at who is not supported through that grant? So I'm trying to be careful about Living Green having a formal position here and any optics around, you have a seat at the table, so you've got access to dollars that others don't. So how do we roll this out to say, where do we create a more equitable situation if we feel it's not, around grants that we support and fund, and those that actually can't find themselves in it? So hypothetically, Living Green, Urban Pantry, other community charitable not-for-profits that don't actually have access to the same type of municipal grants that others do. So I would kind of look at that as an area of question for this committee to say, how is the city going to balance opportunities for initiatives that tie to sustainability, climate action, and active transportation that don't necessarily have a place in other grants? And calling maybe for the city to look at something, so we don't have and have nots just by process. And then, like, lastly from that, I think that creates an avenue that allows Living Green and any others to kind of have access to funds outside of initiatives that we might, as an advisory board, say, this makes sense. Like, from a alignment of initiatives, this makes sense. How are we supporting it? How are we partnering with agencies in our community to formally support this, and maybe being a bit more direct there? And then I guess lastly, so we're not operating in a vacuum, I mean, if we're going to plan out the next 4 years for the next committee, wouldn't it be great if staff came to the table to that committee in the beginning and said, this is where the climate adaptation strategy is going to go over the next 4 years. This is what we need from you to support us from a resident engagement, activation, and to be an educated voice, champion voice around these things, and how can you help? And so how do we, if we think about active transportation, adaptation, and then kind of the climate emergency, how do we have line of sight over the next 4 years around where staff have a budget and have been empowered in their role and scope to move things forward? And then how are they helping to come to the table and basically saying, this is where you have a mandate and this is where you can have a real impactful role. And then we can kind of stay focused around how do we build momentum for some things at a resident level of change, and or when there's an intake budget being asked, a real appreciation going to council to say, you need to be paying attention to this because it has a relationship to the strategy. Don't look at it as a one-page itemized list of maybe a part position or a consultant for something, but it actually has, to not fund it, you need to understand the ramifications and make a more informed decision.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the threads just aren't connected, right? To ask versus strategy.
Definitely. That's a really good point. So I'm making some notes here to add some stuff in around that. I think that's a great suggestion to have like that happen at the beginning of the term too, like the key staff people for each of these strategies coming in, sort of giving, here's where we're at, here's where our plan is over the next 4 years of your term. And then maybe specifically on budget, like, can they speak specifically to what new budget resources in 2023, 2024, 2025 are supporting these plans? And if those resources aren't there, then the committee needs to think about providing advice to council that those resources get put in.
Ideally if staff can say, this is how you can help me. Right?
I know sometimes we try to get that answer from staff and you got to walk a fine line. It's like ultimately council's the one who's directing them, but we're here to back them up too. Okay, Andy, you're up next.
So, Anne-Marie covered a lot of what I was going to chime in with the because I think this is one of the more important discussions we've had since I've come on anyway, is like, what is this committee's role? Is it about advice? Like, are we, and who are we advising? Are we just advising other councillor members that aren't on this committee? Or is it trying to work with staff? And I think setting that for the next one is going to be really important. I think putting this together, Keenan, good idea, great initiative, because I know even though, Living Green, we came in, Eric was on our committee, our board of directors. And so he was sort of advising us a bit, but then he stepped off our board of directors. So then Living Green got their formal role. I don't think you heard from me from the first probably 3 to 4 meetings, and now you can't shut me up. But because there's a transition period, like none of us were going to walk into this and have guns a-blazing. I know what was all about. And I think to get the committee to be a lot more effective for this next term, it should be very clearly mandated. This is what we do. And you're going to be able to get people not waiting 4 months, 4 meetings before they can chime in, because now oh, that's what this is and that's what we're supposed to be doing. So again, kudos you for trying to take a stab at this. And I don't know if we're going to get to it today, but getting that, are we an advisory committee or are we an action committee? I think it was like, again, I love how it's kind of coming out in almost an organic way with this Bike the Night. Like suddenly this committee is coming up with an event, and this committee didn't have a formal budget for it, or at least one that was accessible, like even like who's taking the lead on that. Like, so Living Green stepped in to do it because we know that is something that we do. We do events. But I think like getting that terms of reference down so we know exactly what we do and what we don't do, absolutely vital to the success. And making sure, as Kelly points out, we're not just talking into our little echo chamber, not actually making those actions, because this is a lot of expertise, a lot of big brains around the table, a lot of years of experience, we definitely could be a little bit more effective in what we're trying to do. So I'll leave it there.
No, absolutely. Great points, important points. And I think the next term of the committee will have the benefit of it not being the first term of a new committee. I think, we had a different chair at the beginning of the committee, this committee's term. We've had a lot of changeover in membership, and it was a brand new committee that was sort of just two separate groups smushed together and not much direction on how to achieve our goals. So yeah, I think it's good that we're sort of having this reflection time on what worked and what didn't over the past term, and that advice to the new term. Laurel, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say something else when I first put up my hand, but now there's been so much discussion. Anyways, the only thing I can add now at this point, I think, is that I think the things that you put in your PowerPoint are measurable items, which I think is important to do that distinction. So there's, like, everybody, clearly we've got our hands in a lot of different pots here, but the priority handover document, I think it makes sense that it would be the measurable things. So, ongoing input into the greenhouse gas plan, a target to have a cyclable city, those are things that we can work towards and try to push towards that are measurable, which I think is sometimes it helps to prioritize all these different ideas. But anyway, there's a lot to do here, I think, as far as the overall mandate goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the advantage of having all these plans and strategies. Like, the city has contracted consultants and had their internal experts, do months and months of work with stakeholders on all these plans and strategies, and they have timelines and actions within those plans and strategies. And I think we could go a long way as a committee, just advocating for resources to back up those and providing advice on how best to implement those plans and strategies. Okay. Any other thoughts right now? Should I go back to the presentation maybe and do the last couple of slides? And I've made some good notes here, some good feedback. Just quickly, I think we are working with the structure of the committee itself, the legislative structure of the city itself. Like, the advisory committee is kind of the structure that exists for engaging citizens in the legislative process at the municipal level. As far as I know, there isn't another formal type of body that really does that, and it's all about that advisory capacity for pretty much every other committee. Although I guess some of them do provide, do events, and the International Relations Committee sort of does run some programming as well, and they have a budget attached to do that. But I think we'll have a hard time sort of moving away from that advisory committee structure, because that is sort of our key role, our core role. And I think emphasizing that to the new committee and sort of providing those opportunities to provide advice in a way that's going to make the biggest impact is probably the right path forward. Any other thoughts on the mandate piece, on how we should approach that, or any other suggestions?
Maybe just a quick comment in case we run out of time, because I think we're close. Do you want feedback to you? If we can circulate the deck, and maybe just other thoughts. But on structure, I mean, my quick one is, what about two co-chairs? If we've got individuals that are really passionate about active transportation versus sustainability and climate action, maybe we've got two different, thought leaders that can support rounding out the agenda and/or splitting time, or every other month it's a different topic and we actually know what we're getting into at a deeper level, and can spend some time on it. So maybe it's just a recommendation around how do you balance two mandates, so people know, am I going to get the value out of the meetings and what to expect on the agenda, and how it can be equitable between those two important aspects.
I love that suggestion. I like the idea of doing every other meeting. I don't know how other people feel about that. And I like the co-chair suggestion too. I think that's great. Do we feel comfortable putting that as a recommendation to the new term?
I so move that.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that's a great way of sort of formally building that infrastructure. The concern that Wilf has raised a couple times now.
I think just from conversation, not that it has been great, but when we have a presentation, we can really dig into kind of other pieces that relate to it in that same thread and not feel like we're just moving to maybe a completely different agenda item that shifts us into a whole different thinking.
Yeah. Okay, so here, quickly, I'll go through the last 3 slides. There's only 3 more slides. And then I'll share them around with the committee too. And then go from there. All right, can everyone see that? Yeah, okay. So the next one was around the city's circular economy framework. I want to do some more work on this slide to sort of parse out exactly where the committee can focus its effort on advocacy and advice to City Council on the circular economy. It's kind of a starting point for that. And then I've got the climate change adaptation strategy. And I put in here advocating for funding and specifically requesting an update on the implementation plan, because there are actions within the implementation plan with timelines that have just kind of been left behind and not funded and not resourced. So I think a formal update from staff to this committee at the beginning of the next term about, here's the things we have completed in the implementation plan, here's the things that haven't, then we can start advocating for that funding. Anything on this piece?
This is me being
Emma?
picky. I just move it up to be the second slide. So there's a relationship to it. It's not forgotten about, or disconnected.
No, I think that's a great suggestion. Although I might keep Cycleberry as second, and then this is third. Is that okay? Yeah. So we're balancing sustainability and active transportation. Okay.
Yeah. If you don't mind, where does because we seem for some reason to have separated climate adaptation and climate mitigation in our city, and we have 2 separate groups working on this, and I'm not sure why. But so the climate change adaptation strategy, is there a separate climate change mitigation strategy?
Yes, there is. That's the greenhouse gas, community energy greenhouse gas reduction plan is the climate mitigation strategy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then,
Andy?
and then the urban forest strategy should maybe be acknowledged as well. Because that hasn't been updated in a lot of years, and it also sets some things that the city was going to do by a certain time.
That's a great point. And early on in the term of this committee, we did have a presentation on the urban forest strategy and provided a recommendation to council that I think was one of our recommendations that just went out into the ether and nothing happened. So no, that's a really, really good point. Do you think having a separate slide on the urban forestry strategy would be appropriate? How do people feel about that? Andy, do you have thoughts on that?
Possibly, but I mean, it really, yeah. I mean, when they started the urban forest strategy, I don't think that they had got the climate change stuff in there, but I'm not sure, and I actually should look into this. Have they linked the two? To me, it seems like when you're talking about green infrastructure and adaptation and mitigation, the urban forest strategy is an integral part of that. So I'm not sure if there's been any formal adaptation or adoption of synthesizing those strategies together.
Yeah, I'll take another look at the adaptation plan because they could be pretty closely linked. Will?
Keenan, you just said something which I'm going to just ask a question. You said some of the recommendations have just sort of vanished into the ether, and that theme has come up a couple of times during this call. And so I would just kind of ask ourselves a question on how do we gain more credibility working with staff and with council so that when we make recommendations, we're recognized as a committee that has engaged the community, engaged staff, and that our recommendations are important and meaningful and need to be acted on. I'm not sure the answer to that at all. I think you and Anne-Marie would have a much better insight on how we accomplish that, but I think that might be an important challenge for the committee moving forward to just raise raise our profile and credibility to so our recommendations are turn into action.
Mm-hmm. Anne-Marie, did you have some thoughts on
Well,
that?
I'm wondering if it's just a broader conversation around how we follow the bouncing ball for how recommendations move through reference committee, then to council, and then outcomes. And so sometimes even the reporting gets consolidated within minutes of committees and then taken for information, but no action. So I think it's probably maybe a broader piece, even back to the legislative and court services, about how recommendations actually loop back to the committee as a report, either through city staff, like through support staff and or through representatives, but some type of tracking so we can identify what meetings they actually landed on and then what happened if it was just taken for information or was something actually moving that we want to be mindful of keeping on our agenda.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps there's room here for like a whole slide or a whole section of this final document where we talk about, you know, follow through on recommendations and how we achieve that. And you know, maybe recommending to the committee they work with legislative and court services at the beginning to ensure that every recommendation gets tracked and followed back to the committee itself. Maybe working to refine the motions that the new term passes to provide deadlines, or you know, they can work with staff to try to find a deadline that'll work so that we're keeping track of when it comes back. Brett, I see your hand is up, so I don't know if you have some thoughts on this piece.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to give an update. I know we're not going to get to it through this meeting today, but just wanted to note to committee members, the recommendation pending list isn't as negative as it looks. I did a quick review on the active transportation items, and the majority of them are addressed. And I think there's just maybe an information breakdown getting back to you. I can't speak to our park staff. They're on vacation today, but I think this will work out well for the next meeting. They'll be able to fill in that data. And I'm hoping that they'll be in the same position I am as well. So it's not what's presented. I think it's much better shape than what's there. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Brett. We appreciate that. Okay, anything else on this adaptation slide for now? I've got some good feedback on that. Okay, and then I have this specific initiative in here too. Sherry had mentioned this at a previous meeting when we were talking about the transition document. And I think it's, you know, there's a lot of structure in place here already that we could support. I'm not really exactly sure what our role can be on this initiative, so I'm open to thoughts on that. But I
have a September meeting, right? Maybe it would be topical to put it on the agenda because we've got meetings happening at a steering committee level before that, and then, as Justin was sharing, some movement on that before back to school. So perhaps if Sherry's available, or Sarah, we could, and members of that committee might be able to kind of talk a bit about where that committee conversation leaves off on August the 9th, and if there's anything that we want to include into the next term of this committee's work plan.
Yeah, I think that's a great time for a discussion, a deeper discussion on this. Okay, I realize we're 6 minutes over, so I don't want to keep all of you, but I'll send around those slides. We did kind of, like a lot of these items we didn't get to on the agenda kind of fit into each other, our similar conversation about, you know, the future of this committee. On the committee name change, just quickly, I don't know if people have quick thoughts on that or if wanted to send an email with quick thoughts, but I think it's an interesting idea. I just don't know if people feel good about that. Anne-Marie?
I guess my quick thoughts are leave it to the next term of the committee, rather than, you know, a couple of months before they resume that mandate. We've made a decision that they may or may not be aligned with, but might just fall into them reviewing their terms of reference, resetting that, and just saying, you know, consider it, see what you think. I mean, I don't feel passionate about one way or the other. I think it's more about the structure of how we balance a conversation and target some initiatives a bit more specifically.
Kelly?
Yeah, that was me putting that up there. I like climate action because it's action. So it would just, that's all. It was like sustainability. I don't know, it mean a whole lot of things, but if we, part of the action, and I really like Anne Marie's idea. It's like, okay, well, we've got funding for arts and we've got funding for sports. We need funding for climate action. And perhaps that's something that could align with the committee, if we had that, grant opportunity for climate action for our working groups in Barrie. Just, I think I agree. We'll let the next committee decide. But I'm advocating for climate action.
I wish we had a snappier name, to be honest. It's just too long. It's just too hard to say. Okay. Any other thoughts, burning thoughts that you want to share here in the meeting, recognizing we are a little over time, but like, if you really feel like you want to say something about the transition document now, feel free. Eric?
Can I seriously make a motion that we look at having co-chairs covering the two main themes, and also, if possible, have alternating meetings?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. Do we want to motion that formally and change the structure, or do we, because I was thinking we'd put that in the transition document as a recommendation to the new term, but if we want to formally change that before the new term, I'm open to that idea as well. I saw Emery unmute, and then I think Will had his hands up, but
I'm supportive of it. I think it can still move because it's within our operations and it goes for information to council, right? So I think we're still able to make that change if we want to, and have them try it out based on our learnings.
Yeah.
So I support that.
We could try it through the fall.
That's it. That's a good idea. Yeah. How
many
operate
with it?
September, October, November, 3 meetings. That's an interesting idea. Andy, did you have some thoughts on that? And then Wilf, I don't know if you still had your hand up there. No, okay.
Sorry, my hand was up about something else. If we were ending, not about that point.
Okay. Do we want to just try it as a sort of a pilot for the fall, and do like maybe the September meeting on sustainability or climate action, and then the October meeting on active transportation, see how that goes, and we'll have a different chair for each?
October fits well because we'll be coming at a bike the night and back to school. So I would say October would fit from an active transportation.
What if we hash out the terms at the September meeting and sort of figure out the logistics of what we want to try, and then do it for October or November?
I like that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we need to pick a co-chair and which meetings, and sort of set a slightly different agenda format. So there'll be a bit of discussion around that.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So if we leave that to the September meeting, and yeah, we could do a quick trial run and let the new term know how it went. Everyone good with that approach? Yeah. All right. Since we're not making any formal changes right now, it sounds like we're good. We've got consensus, or mostly at least. Okay, Andy, did you have something else to add?
I did, yeah. So one point of clarification, which was I had given you some false information about the amount of people who have registered for Bike the Night. It's actually only 83 that have registered through the Eventbrite, but it's a much higher number of Facebook people who said they're going. So I wanted to clarify that.
I mean, 83 is a lot, so don't say
a lot,
oh,
but yeah, no, it wasn't the 150 that I said, so I don't know where I was getting that one from. And then the final one I wanted to point out is I've just found out about this. The Rotary Club of Barrie is hosting Bob McDonald, host of Corks and Corks, to do an event on Tuesday, September 20 at Georgian College Theatre, all about climate action. So I don't know if they've started to actively promote this yet, but like it's just come across my desk recently, but this seems like something, and I think this is something that they had planned for Earth Day, but it got canceled because of COVID. And so I think this is a reschedule. So I'm just pointing it out right now because I think it's of value to this committee.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Awesome. And then can I quickly, I'm going to send the link around, but can we make time if it fits around other kind of new initiatives. So we're getting some feedback soon from Communities in Bloom, but one of the judges already had an impression that we would probably do very well around applying for Green Canada's or the Green Canadian Communities grant or competition based on some of the progress staff have made across different departments and what was showcased during that. So maybe we'll have some feedback at that time, but I wouldn't want to lose sight on it because it might be something that falls more formally under this mandate.
Yeah, sure. So sorry, that's an agenda item in September for.
If I can just share a little bit about Green Communities,
Green Communities,
and
okay.
then see if anyone's familiar, and I'll point to links, but 5 minutes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Sounds good. And if there are any other agenda items for the September meeting, let Brandy and I know. Anything else anyone wanted to say before we adjourn the meeting? Sorry for keeping you late. Everyone good? Okay, that's great. Thanks so much, Brandy. Thanks, Brett and Justin for being here. Thanks to all the committee members. And I will circulate those slides after I make a few changes based on the discussion today and solicit your feedback. Brandy, anything else you need from us before we adjourn? Or
no, not that I can think of off the top of my head, although I know how to get a hold of everybody. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thanks so much, everyone, and take care, and hope you continue to enjoy the summer.